Peter, thanks so much for joining us. You were appointed in September 2018 as the chairman of the STADA Executive Board, and at that time, STADA was a loose confederation of country organizations. Since then, you've transformed it into a global player in generics and specialty pharma. You've doubled the company in 5 years, and you've done that by launching new products, by improving internal processes. Part of that process was establishing a growth culture based on the values of agility, entrepreneurship, integrity, and One STADA for your 13,000 employees worldwide. Can you talk first briefly about why culture change was needed to improve STADA's potential for growth?
Yeah, if you look at growth, you need to think about what's your strategy, right? Because you need to know the direction, you need to know your North Star. So we developed our purpose, which is caring for people's health as a trusted partner. And based on this, we had the vision to outperform the industry. And then, of course, the question is always, how do you do it? And we defined 5 growth pillars. To be a marketing and sales expert in order to sell what you have as good as possible. To accelerate the portfolio and pipeline in order to have an engine for growth for the future. To be lean in back office. Number 4, to have a supply chain that is reliable. But now coming to the point, having a strategic pillar, which is growth mindset, was pretty unique. And then, of course, if you have this as a strategy, you have to map out the actions. What does it really mean? So I think it all started with sitting down with the whole team, with the broader team, being clear that these are the 5 key pillars and then executing on them. So I would say the key task was, from a growth culture perspective, to move from something, as you said, was very loose, not coordinated, at the same time, very essential, very hierarchical, to a picture and to a company which is run by strong values. And these values in the end drove performance. And our 4 values are agility, integrity, One STADA, and entrepreneurship, which really drove the agenda.
So once you had identified those 4 values and those 5 strategic pillars, and one of those was the growth mindset, what did you do practically to make sure that everybody understood those values, those pillars, throughout the whole organization?
As we all know, structure follows strategy. So it was very important to have the strategy in order to build the right structure. So that means if we want to build this muscle of accelerating pipeline and M&A, you need not only the right quantity and capacity, you need the right people, you need experts, you need people who know the world of in licensing, in generics, in consumer healthcare, and in specialty pharma. So what we did is we mapped out the structure and then we tried to fill as fast as we could with the right people, but not the right people for the task today, right people who can do where we wanted to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So one of the core focus in the beginning was, after we had the strategy and the structure, to really find superior industry talents.
And it sounds like once you had those talents, then you needed to rely on them to get the message heard in the parts of the organizations that they're taking over, whether they're coming in from the outside or whether they're talents you've identified in STADA and elevated to those key roles.
Exactly, because there's this old saying that great people hire great people and average people hire inferior people. That was the absolute key. So we looked at our key people, not only direct reports to me, but we looked also at the broader global STADA leadership team. So we went through all key managers and decided who should be part of the STADA global leadership team. So we ended up with roughly 140 people, which is roughly 1% of the overall company. And we had to ensure that, especially for this 140 roles, we tried to find the best people in the industry. So now you might challenge me and say, oh, Peter, what's best? The point is, I cannot tell you what's best for every position, but I can hire people who can explain to me how best look like for that position or role for the next couple of years.
Let's zoom in on one of those values, entrepreneurship. Because being in pharma, you're a highly regulated industry. Not only that, but safety is absolutely essential. So how did you manage to encourage the right kind of entrepreneurship without losing the controls that are essential for your license to operate?
You're right. Our industry is more regulated than a lot of other industries. But still, you're responsible for how fast you take decisions, how fast people can move themselves from having an idea to execution of an action, and how fast do you have to escalate when you need additional money. And that's something we try to address when we talk with our leadership team about entrepreneurship. That's something we try to address with launching a program which is called STADA Plus, where you can go for a business entrepreneurial idea with very limited approval levels whenever you want, independent from budget or strat plan processes. If it's a great idea, we want to invest behind that idea. And if we see that idea has a clear business case, then the approval is more or less there. So we had the idea to jumpstart our consumer healthcare business in China. And we have launched now a few products. We have accelerated the business. We did the same as in the US. In China, it looks like it's working out. In the US, we learned and failed because I think we need a bigger platform in order to do consumer healthcare and accelerate consumer healthcare in the US. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of business cases. There are a lot of things we do, but it will not always work, everything. So you have to live with the fact that something fails. But big picture, the great successes compensate by far the areas where we failed.
That's true for STADA overall, and it's a very certain type of mindset, almost a venture capital mindset, that the wins outweigh the losses. How do you help individuals in STADA think about, on the one hand, the need to perform, to be very accountable, to clear targets, and on the other hand, to be able to take these risks that might fail, and that's okay because it means that you're stretching?
I think you said the right word. It's entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is something which is really related to being creative, but at the same time being fully accountable, right? If you as an entrepreneur open something up, a startup, you convince people to give you money, you invest your own money, you want to be pretty sure that it's bold, but at the same time, you're sure and convinced that that something will fly. So it's not only to write a good business case on paper, it is really more about you choose with whom to sit at one table, discuss the idea, and then come together with a broader group of people to the point that we say, yeah, that's something we should go for. And that's something we should go for before we go something else. And then there's a lot of things really which can be developed. And actually, we have it in all functions. It's not just like marketing and sales. It's not in licensing. So it's really pretty broad, actually.
So let's take another one of the values, One STADA. You have reaped in the past great benefits from the fact that you are very local in the markets in which you operate. You have different brands in different markets. They've been quite independent. What's the benefit of thinking One STADA?
So if you start really big picture, 14 or nearly 14,000 employees, One STADA means if you are an individual, one of the 14,000, you have access to 14,000 other people. And I think that's the way you have to look at it. It's a very different thinking. And that means if you see or heard that something happened well in China or happened well in Vietnam or in Portugal or in the UK, pick up the phone. Make a virtual meeting with people who have similar products, which are working on the same problems. Have a supplier which is difficult. Have an idea how to develop a pain portfolio or a multivitamin portfolio. So use the resources, use the whole team. So that's one thing. Then you have the technical piece, right? Which is, we did purchasing all over the place. A central purchasing function, working with economy of scale in a lot of areas has helped a lot. One negotiator. So I think that's very important. But at the same time, also understand that we as One STADA has to show up like this to our customers. It cannot be that we have like 5, 6, 7 different people approaching the same companies for different things like contract manufacturing, for developing, for licensing. So everything where we thought we create added value, that's where we do One STADA. Everything which is just like bringing stuff together because it looks good on paper, we coordinate it centrally, we don't do. So value creation within One STADA is key.
So in a sense, there's a bias towards keeping it local unless it clearly adds value to centralize.
Exactly. If you compare today our global teams to peers or even companies which are much bigger, I think we have a completely lower number of central functions than most others, right? We ran a global consumer healthcare business where we are now number 4 in Europe, number 6 worldwide, with less than 30 people centrally. We have a compliance functions where we said compliance is a culture, it's not a function. So we have less than 5 people centrally, where others have tens, right? And I think that's really the importance, that you have to balance between local and global, but also what is culture, whereas people executing something which should be actually part of the culture.
So is that maybe the answer to the question of how you've been able to create more One STADA feeling without putting on the kind of bureaucracy that you don't want in STADA?
Yeah, it's the short ways, it's picking up the phone, it's cooperating, and you cannot imagine how big of an advantage it was when COVID started, or with our geopolitical situations and the war we have, right? It was very difficult at the beginning of COVID to ship something from Serbia to Russia. People were protectionistic about the drugs and the medicines, right? It was very difficult at the end of COVID to get stuff out of China. If you want to coordinate this all globally, it's very difficult. So One STADA means also to talk to each other, to talk to your colleagues in different countries, to think about what you can do. And that doesn't mean, and it's very important, to build big databases, to have at the internet case studies, or to have very difficult ways of communication. It's really about talking to the people which can create value for your idea, for your business needs, and at the same time understand their needs, because it's the bigger picture and it's the value chain in itself which counts, and not the individual rule.
Speaking very practically, how do you foster and strengthen those connections among people in different countries?
From the first training, international training of people being new in the company early in their careers, to whatever kind of training, and say you have to empower yourself. It's One STADA, you can ask everybody about everything all the time, and that's the beauty, and take it as an opportunity. I give an award for One STADA for all values, as I mentioned, integrity, entrepreneurship, and so on, every 6 months. Half-year award, year-end award. And I showcase great behavior in terms of One STADA.
One of the impressive things, Peter, that you've done in STADA is you've built a foundation, a platform that is very scalable. I mean, you've already doubled, but as I understand it, you've got a platform that could allow you to double or even triple. So I'd be interested for you to say a word about that. But second, when you think about connecting people together, when you think about the leadership team coming together, is that something that can also scale as your business continues to grow at such a pace?
So I think if you take over a company, what's really key is the dream you have for the future, right? If you just think about how do I fix the problem at hand, you will be as good as others at that given moment. But if you think about what you want to be, what the company want to be in 5 years, in 10 years, I think you build very different, right? So if you want to build a small house, but in the end you need a big house, but you start with a very small house as the base, then maybe you have to start all over in 3 years or in 5 years or in 6 years. But if you build the house in a way that it can be a house with whatever, 50 floors instead of 3, and you start with the foundation that this is possible, then you can get there. And I think that's what we really did in STADA. We always ask ourselves, if we do a management reporting system, how should it look like if the company would be 5 times the size? If we improve our supply chain system, what needs to happen? If we have more SKUs, more units than anybody else in our industry on the planet, how can we? I think you get the whole story. It's really about the visionary clarification on how big look like, how your dream looks like, and then build it in a way that you are scalable and a scalable platform. And the second part of your question was how to manage with the team. I think it is the same thing. You only attract people, in my view, especially if they have bigger jobs or broader jobs today, by excite them about the vision you have. It's, for a lot of people today, more about the journey and what you can build rather than just about being big and maybe being in a stagnating bureaucratic business. And who is a real entrepreneur, where do people want to be? They want to be where the fun is, the growth is, and new successes rather than managing a very big, slow machine.
This seems absolutely key, that you're putting in to the important positions in the company people who believe in the dream, who have the same vision, that match the vision that STADA has, and that share those values. When you're looking to attract people from the outside, or when you're looking to elevate people from the inside, how are you determining that fit with the vision and the values?
In general, I believe behavior was driven by values, right? And your values are based on you can call it core principles or attitude or whatsoever. So that means if I have discussions with people, especially if they are for broader leadership roles, you find a ton of people with awesome CVs. You also find a ton of people with great past performance. But to your point, how do I find out if they really fit to STADA? It's really to understand their motivation, why they love to work, their motivation, why they would join STADA, and their motivation for their own life. So what is driving their happiness? What is driving their desire to be in an environment which is driven by growth and growth determined, right? So a lot of the selection piece here is really attitude driven and then based on our values. So understanding people's real motivation is very important.
Does that mean literally asking them what makes them happy?
Yeah, that's what we ask. We ask, are you happy? And then everybody will say, yeah, I'm happy. Most people will say, I'm happy. Then why are you happy? Who's responsible that you are happy? What are you doing to stay happy? What do you want to do with the rest of your life, even if you don't know how long it will be? But I want to have people who are able to think about these things, right? And are looking at their roles and their jobs in a more holistic way than just a job, right? Because in the end, we spend most of the time of every day in our job. So it's better we think about how this is part of our lives and that we have a very conscious decision to do what we are doing.
How do you think about the mix between hires from the outside and promotions from the inside?
So the spontaneous answer is, I want to have the best person. And the best person is the person who can articulate how best looks like in that job or for that job, right? But on the other hand, I also want to make sure and show people that if you're doing great, you have a future in STADA. So of course, I want to promote as many people in STADA to give new opportunities and new roles and new ideas. But sometimes we come to a situation where we have to be honest, where I say, hey, you're an awesome talent. I would love to keep you. But if you want my honest advice, that's the right role. I cannot offer you that role at the moment. So if you want to progress, go somewhere else, come back in 3 or 4 years. Nothing is forever. And you can join and when it fits. So I think the answer to that question is really to walk in the shoes of the person you're talking to, right? And what you think with your experience and your view, what actually could be great. And it could be the next logical step. But sometimes you have also to open ideas to people and say, hey, look, I'm in finance. I'm now a country CFO. I would become a regional CFO. And then maybe you come and answer and say, hey, have you thought about to be a super regional CFO to become the head of compliance for that region or to become someone who is doing a very different task in order to get a broader experience level to do what you want to do in the future even better. So I think it's these discussions on a very individualized, personal way, which really can help people to grow and not purely on a STADA egoistic way, what's best for the company.
So let's talk a little bit about growth mindset, that fifth pillar of the strategy. Give us a little more detail. What is growth mindset? What does it mean specifically for you and the company?
Growth mindset is, as I mentioned before, is more the holistic concept, right? It's not a specific company concept. It's more like how you look at your life. And I would like that people look at their lives about where are my opportunities? Where can I personally grow? Growth mindset is not pure P&L growth, right? Growth mindset is in the first place individual growth. Because if you are growing as an individual and you take it serious, I'm convinced your team will grow. If your team will grow, STADA as a company will grow, right? And I'm convinced of this. So again, it's of course the idea of having growth ideas and doing STADA Plus as we have discussed. But in the end, growth mindset is really that we want to have people on board who love what they are doing, who see the opportunities, who are more glass half full than empty, and are very positive about what they think is possible. And that also includes developing a dream for the area of responsibility and thinking way bigger than maybe others do.
It's not unique, but it is special that you focus a lot on this. You know, sometimes people have a view that the soft concepts of mindset and culture and leadership are secondary. And when you included growth mindset in the strategy, and let's take that one specifically, how did you think about tracking progress?
We track progress on STADA Plus. We track progress in terms of attitude within our employee surveys, and we track progress in terms of what talents we get on board. And I can tell you, when I presented this first time to an investor community, when I presented this raising additional debt for M&A and presented our fifth growth pillar, everybody, of course, agrees intellectually that culture is important and values are important, and no CEO would ever dispute this. But the question is, how many proof points, to your point, you really have that it's actually working? And how many points you have where you can showcase that culture drives performance? And I think we have a lot of these proof points, and one, which I just mentioned, is the Global Employee Survey. If you look at our Global Employee Survey, you see engagement levels which are not only above average of the industry, they are above benchmark in a lot of categories. So to make a long story short, people just are proud to be with the company, people believe in the business results, and they have, based on all this, very high engagement levels. And I think engagement levels is a very, very good predictor of future performance. And I think we have very good proof points where we have and can show high correlation between the engagement levels and the performance they have achieved in the next couple of months.
And it's worth pointing out that you're achieving these high scores at a time when you're growing quickly, and so people are working hard because of that. And you're an organization that runs lean. And so this is satisfaction despite, or maybe even because of, the enormous amount of work that's required.
Plus self-determined work, I would say. And let's not forget, I think we have also a lot of people on board who want to be here, right? Because it's not very easy to sustain that over years. If you think this is not really my culture, you have more like a 9-to-5 approach, you have more like a bureaucratic administrative approach, then it's very difficult to survive. And I think we have also a lot of people who are voluntarily resigning because they see, hey, actually, that's maybe not my place. My intention is not to be part of the Champions League. My intention is not to win and want to be the number one in this and that. So I think there's also an element of how do you select the people you have? What kind of team you want to have is what attitudes, as we have discussed before. And then the more player you have, they pull in the same direction in terms of values and behavior, I think the more synergistic it gets.
One of the megatrends is the shift towards hybrid working. This is especially interesting in the context of a company like STADA that's very focused on the culture of the company. How do you think about hybrid working in STADA?
So I think these discussions very often ignoring reality in a company. So if you talk about hybrid working, I talk about in STADA less than 25% of our employees, because more than 50% of our employees are employed in factories, development center, supply chain. So that's hands-on stuff. Can't do that from home. Very difficult. Some jobs maybe, but in general, it's there. If you are in sales, of course you can do calls. Of course you can get in contact with your key opinion leaders, with your doctors, with nurses, with pharmacies, also via Zoom and telephone. But in the end, you have to be out there. So here you go, another 25%, right? And I can continue for a lot of jobs, receptionist, right? Even headquarter, receptionist. So my answer is, we want to be flexible and be respectful for people's situation, work environment, family situation. And we can have areas where this is absolutely possible. But in general, I think it's a team sport. It's one STADA. I'm so convinced, and I see it after COVID, how people really work together when they are in one room, how they interact, how they challenge. I think it's very different and creates higher productivity. Plus, we do every year a so-called health report across Europe, which is a lot of countries. And to make a long story short, we actually found out that during and after COVID, mental health issues, burnout issues have increased a lot. And the one major single reason, besides a couple of others, but the main reason is really that a lot of people cannot deal with the situation being alone at home. So being social, being among others is actually important also for mental health. And nothing new, right? We know since decades that elderly people who are alone at home versus people who are very socially active live longer. It's proven. And it's not really different in the work environment you have. As I said, balanced with individual circumstances to bring flexibility. But in general, I think my view is very clear that working together in STADA, being together physically, is an important success factor.
Peter, turning to you as a leader, how would you describe your leadership approach?
So first of all, I would say it is a development now over a lot of years, and I've changed a lot. And I can tell you, I was scared to death to explain someone that culture drives performance 20 years ago. Actually, if I'm really honest, I didn't really believe in, right? You have to try a little bit, you try here, you give it room, you try when there's good performance, so you cannot mess up too much. And then the question is, how do you link it? That culture drives performance doesn't mean you don't do business reviews anymore. It doesn't mean you go deep and micro where you think it's needed because it's fundamental for the company. It just means you do it always with the right attitude and the right values, but you care. And I would say, if you ask me how I see myself today, I think I have a big dream. The business I want to run, I want that the people believe in what we have developed as a vision, as a dream. So you really have great followership and a team really which likes what they are doing and they go for the bigger thing. And you do it in a way that it's fun for a lot of people. But at the same time, I also want the rigor that people take it very serious for what they're accountable for, because in the end, growth, also financial growth, means having more money to invest. And if we don't succeed, we might have less money and we cannot afford the people we have in a given country, or geography, department, function, or whatsoever. So I think you have to take also responsibility and take it very serious on what you are doing. So in short, I think it's important to be visionary, to be determined, but to love the business as well and go into the weeds if needed.
Being the CEO of an international company is a very demanding job for you. What are the kind of things that you do to keep yourself at peak performance?
Yeah, comes back to what we discussed before, being in the flow, being happy. So you decide what kind of meaning you give everything you see in life. Because I believe that nothing in itself has a meaning as such. It's all culture driven, it's all experience driven, it's all legacy driven, whatever you want. So in the end, I can decide if my commute between two continents is a burden or is a pleasure. For me, it's a pleasure because I have time to work. I can live here, I can live there. I have family on both sides of the planet. And it's a unique privilege. You can interpret this in a completely different way, right? You can take every challenge you have as a burden or as an opportunity to grow. So I really try to wake up in the morning and think about what great things we can do as a company or with the family. And I like to go to bed and thinking about what was great and what really gives me energy. And so it's being conscious about what you are doing and also then come to a conclusion on how much time you want to spend with what, right? I'm not a big fan of work-life balance because for me, everything is all the time. But you have to make sure that you spend the right and the right quality time with what you think is important in your life.
All right, thank you. That's fantastic. Really great. Just appreciate it so much, Peter.
Thank you so much, John.